Right, so this don't want, do want explained. I think sometimes I've had trouble explaining this. It's quite hard to put into words, but hopefully I can break this down a bit more logically for you as to the kind of process that I go through in my mind when I'm doing this with a client. And it really came about of just my very, very logical mind. Sometimes I probably, at some point, probably with a client, got frustrated. And, well, if you don't want that, what do you want? That's probably what I thought or said. And it actually started becoming very useful. So I started using it and digging around a little deeper with it and playing around with it. But let's see if we can go through it and explain it for you. So don't want, do want. Okay, so in simple, it's very simple in theory, right? And sometimes it is very, very simple in practice as well. I'll try and give you an example of that as well. But sometimes it can be quite complex in practice. And it's profoundly effective when used correctly. So it's really worth the effort getting to know it. I think in the Facebook post or the email I sent out, I said that one of the most common things I see when I see people doing this in classroom is they keep it far too superficial. You see what I mean in just a moment. They keep it the too surface level. And it's all right, but you don't get the deep enough transformation there. So that's what I mean by complex. I want to kind of dig a little deeper in things so we can get a better result. Okay, so tell me a bit of background. Very often when a client starts talking to you, it could be the first time we meet or any session during your treatment together, I'll often pour out a monologue of what they've been through. Been thinking this, feeling this, doing this, and I've got this problem here, and it's been like that, and my boss said this, and wife said this, husband said that, son's been doing that, it's like you get the story, okay? And somewhere in the middle of all that, you're trying to work out what this person actually wants. What do they need to change? I mean, if they say I want to stop smoking, that's much more simple, okay? But again, that's a negative. That's what they, in a way, they don't want to be a smoker anymore. Right? They don't want this smoking. They don't want this smoking thing. They want to stop this smoking thing. Right? It's a negative. If it's an eating thing, they might say, "I want to stop binging or purging." Okay. So not always, but very often people will tell you what they don't want more than what they do want. Right. So I tend to look out for this. Okay. What is it you don't want? What are you trying to get away from? What is it you want to change? Okay. Because if you can find out what they don't want first of all, then very often it's easier to start focusing on what they do want to find out what it is. Right? Occasionally, people will tell you what they want very, very enthusiastically. And these people I found actually can be a little bit trickier to deal with because they're so focused on the positive side. They just have avoided anything negative most of their lives. Again, this is a rule of thumb. This is not everybody, this is a generalization, but someone who's very much, I want this, and I want to do that, I want to do that, and all that kind of thing, their mind will probably default to positive stuff rather than negative thing. And asking them, well, what is it you're trying to get away from? What is it you don't want? There will probably be quite a lot of resistance to that. So most of the time, people will be able to tell you what they don't want. You have to try and figure out what they do, but occasionally they'll tell you what they do want. And in those cases, I always find out, well, what is it you don't want? What are you trying to get away from? Just so I know the full story. Okay, because anywhere and anytime, any place there's resistance, you're going to help get a deeper transformation in that person. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Any questions, just ask as we go along and I'll come back to it later on. All right, so first of all, we've got people saying that. Some people saying what they don't want, some people saying what they do want, and I always try and work out what the opposite is in general conversation. Okay, we'll go for an example soon to try and clarify this for you. But very, very simply, what they don't want will be the undesirable symptom or issue that a person wants to change. All right, and what they do want, this will be the positive outcome the person wants once the issue is resolved. Right, now these are the usual answers that people come up with. Okay, trying to get away from this. What I do want is this. Right. So the technique is really simple. Right? You find out what they don't want. Ask them to describe the opposite, which will be what they do want. Right? And then you turn that do want into some form of positive ideas that can be reinforced through suggestion, visualization, mantras, affirmations, any technique you want to employ there. And that's kind of it. Right? Sounds really simple, right? I don't want this. What do you want instead? That? Okay, great. Just reinforce it and everyone's okay. Right? So that's the kind of theory. That's what we're looking for. Right? And sometimes, yes, it's very, very simple. I had an example with a footballer I was working with a couple of weeks ago. Actually, this was all done by WhatsApp message. We're swapping messages. And she was having a bit of a tough time. And I said, so what's it like to be you right now? And she said, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. I said, well, what's the exact opposite of those words you just give me? She gave me 3 good words. One was grounded, loved, and accepted, I think it was. I said, and I read those words, and now, how different does that feel? They said, well, that feels awesome. That feels like I can do anything. I said, okay, great. So just keep those in your mind when you're training. Keep them in the pre-match bit, and keep them in your mind as you go on the pitch, okay? And it was really, really that simple for that person. But I have done quite a lot of digging around with this person to help her clear some stuff out, okay? So sometimes it can be very, very simple. And hopefully by the end of this, when I tell you a little bit extra, you'll realise when it's simple. Okay, I think I've realised there's a certain set of conditions that when it's very, very simple. But I'll explain that later. Right, so sometimes it can just be that. 3 words you don't want, give me 3 words you do want. Now say them to yourself, think about that. What's that like? All right? The opposite of what the negative was. But a lot of the time it's a little more complicated than that. All right? So this is what I want to go through with you so you can take it down a level or so, just so you can get the greater benefit. Okay. But let's just forget people and issues for a moment. Think of it in terms of opposites. All right. Let's say if someone is cold, they don't want to be cold. Well, what do they want? Well, if they don't want to be cold, they want to be warm or hot or something like that. Right. That's kind of the opposite end of the scale. Okay. If they don't want to be wet, for example, we don't say I want to be not wet, unless we're being sarcastic or something. We'd say, well, I want to be dry. You know. But imagine someone who had resistance to saying the word dry. They're like, I'm feeling really wet right now, but I just, I want to be not wet. I want to be not wet, not wet. Well, what do you want to be? I don't know. You don't want to be not wet. What do you want? And they might have resistance to saying the word dry. It sounds ridiculous, I know, okay? But this is what happens with a client. There will be resistance there somewhere, right? So these examples, there shouldn't be any kind of emotional attachment here. Cold to warm and hot, wet to dry. Opposites, very simple, right? But when we start bringing in feelings and emotions and fears and worries and anxieties and unconscious resistance, all that kind of stuff, that's where it starts to get a tiny bit more complicated, okay? Because then if we try and do some opposites, okay, they will either have resistance to saying the positive one, or they will try and jump ahead a level, thereby resisting what they really need to focus on. I'll go through 2 examples of this to illustrate this for you. They will either have resistance to just saying the positive in itself, as I was joking around with just then, or they may jump ahead a level, thereby resisting what they really need to focus on. And the second one of those 2 is what I've found is usually the more important one. So I'm going to break that down for you step by step, logic by logic, so you can see my thinking as I go through this. Right? When you do it, it's very, very simple. You just ask them questions. Same old questions you ask again and again and again, but we're doing it in a certain way and looking for a certain thing. Okay, so if I have any questions, just let me know. All right. So let's say, and I use this example because in the Facebook group the other day there was a chat about this topic, and it was a perfect illustration of this. So I'm going to use that. That's okay, without giving you any details or anything. But let's say some people may find it easy to say they want to lose weight. All right. But it may take some encouragement for them to admit they actually want to be slim. I've heard this many, many times. People can talk about weight loss and losing weight, that's okay. But ask them to think about what it's like once they've lost the weight. And not everybody, but many people will have a resistance to the idea of being slim, for example. All right? So the first kind of resistance to look out for is someone being resistant to that positive idea. All right? Whatever that may be. Just look out for that. And if there's hesitancy, resistance there, you want to just pay attention to that and dig around that a little bit. All right? Because if we just took this at surface value, someone says, I don't want to be overweight, I want to lose weight, I want to be slim. Okay? And I've seen this happen in the classroom. I've given people the exercise. They said, well, we got that. We want to be overweight. They want to be slim. That's the don't want. That's the do want. So we finished. And they sit around having a chat. And I'm thinking, that, I'd probably be doing this for 20 minutes. How come you finished? Right? So, but when we dig a little deeper into it, we find there's a bit more. Right? So this is when I'm going to go through this example and see if we can illustrate that for you. So let's follow this simple example for now. All right. Either there's resistance to the positive, or they may jump ahead. Okay, and the resistance to the positive is quite often because they've jumped ahead a level. All right, so what they don't want is overweight. What they do want is to be slim, like they think. But actually, what they really, really want is something in the middle, a gap in the middle. And this is the bit it took me a long time to spot this. What they really want is something else first of all, something that will create the right conditions first, that will then give them what they want. And this is the bit, if you can learn to spot this is when the whole process becomes extremely effective. They say they don't want this, they think they want this, but actually what they really want is something underneath that will then give them what they think they want. Okay? Something that will create the right conditions. I mentioned this to some of you before. My grandfather was a prisoner of war in the Second World War. He was captured at Dunkirk and driven across France to Poland. Spent 4 years in the Polish concentration camp, and he was part of what's called the Long Marches at the end of the war, where they started marching the prisoners back, and something like 30 to 60,000 prisoners were marched right across Poland back again at the end of the war with literally no food. Thousands and thousands of people died. Okay, my grandfather was extremely lucky to survive. The conditions that he wasn't trying to lose weight, but the conditions there meant he lost weight, and so did everybody else. In fact, many of them died on the way through malnutrition and that kind of stuff. So the right conditions were there. No food, eating grubs. He told me he used to eat grass because he could find any grubs. Grubs were a protein, grass was something. Just marching, exercise, no food. The conditions there were to lose weight. Okay, we don't need to get that extreme, but he didn't need to focus on being slim because the conditions there forced the outcome. All right. So what I'm trying to get you to do with this exercise is think about what people don't want. Think about what outcome they say they want, and begin to think about what conditions need to be there to allow that to happen or make it happen. Okay? So here's how I kind of will probably go about doing that with someone. We'll stay with this kind of example, but here's another little thing someone might say there. If someone says, I don't want to feel nervous, I want to feel confident. Okay? Now, we could just do lots of suggestions saying, you are confident, you're amazing, you're brilliant, you're the most confident person in the world, and that might have an effect, okay, on some people temporarily. But really, what would really help them feel confident is if we could create the right conditions for them to feel confident. What does that person need to be thinking and feeling inside so that they then feel confident? All right? This is the gap in the middle. You want to go from don't want to do want over there, but what they really want is going to be something in the middle. And it's the bit in the middle I'm always looking out for. Everyone okay so far? You follow me so far? Cool. Good. So the trick then, and this is what I tend to do with clients, and what I would urge you to do, is if we got the don't want on one side, which is the issue, okay, the problem, on the right hand side we've got what they want, the positive outcome. And I'd then just drill down into each side, usually on the left hand side, usually on the don't want. I want to go a little bit deeper into that. Okay, why don't they want it? What's it like having that problem? What's it like to be them? And we'll start getting a list of words and phrases that describe what that's like. All right. And then what we're looking to do is find the opposites for those. Go a little bit deeper down to those. They don't want this, they do want that. Because if we can get the opposite to those, that'll begin to create the right conditions for the outcome we want. Okay. Again, we'll go more examples in a moment to try and illustrate this for you. So let's go to the back to that weight loss one. So someone says, I don't really overweight. But I don't know, well, what's it like for you being overweight? Because some people can be, overweight and be fine with it, absolutely happy. They carry their weight well and it doesn't matter, and they're happy, and it's not the slightest issue. Okay. Others, it can be extremely traumatic. Right? So let's say for this person who's overweight there, what's that like? Okay, I want to know what that's like. I also want to know the positive idea. If they want to become slim now, what's that like, the idea of being slim? What's that like to them? What's the underlying feelings? What does it mean to them? All right, so I want to dig around into these ideas, and because these lower levels I want to work at rather than the surface level. Most people doing this will be working at the superficial level on top. You do some fluid questioning, clean questions, unfinished sentences into what each of these things mean on the left and the right, and you'll start getting some much more profound information there. All right. So let's say, I'm paraphrasing from this example. I didn't check it, I just did it from memory the other day, but something like this was a discussion there. The person didn't want to be overweight. What's it like being overweight? Well, this person was feeling low self-worth, they're feeling unattractive, but they somehow felt safe being overweight. Okay. All right, so you want to be slim, so you want to lose some weight and become slimmer. What's that like, the idea to you? Well, that will feel good about myself. I feel more attractive, but actually it's scary as well. Okay. So once we get down to these kind of words, these core ideas, safe, scary, I'm sure you can begin to see the conflict there. Because there's a little problemo here, right, for this person. Because it's safe being overweight and scary being slim. Now, anytime there's any kind of threat, remember, any kind of threat, our stress response is going to kick in some way. And we'll try and avoid feeling that feeling. Anytime there's a threat to self-worth, self-esteem, safety, security, control, sense of connection, all those kind of stuff, anytime there's a threat to that, the stress response will kick in and it will try and resist, it will try and avoid to get us safe again. So using this very simple example here, I'm sure you can begin to see what the effect of this would be. So by drilling down a few levels there, we begin to get the idea that in this person's mind, overweight makes them feel unattractive, but actually they're safe with that. The idea of being slim will make them feel more attractive, but actually that's scary. So the scariness, the threat will kick in and create resistance to losing weight. And the outcome will be resistance to losing weight. So there'll probably be some kind of sabotage of their weight loss program. Okay, everyone all right with that so far? You can see by going down a few levels and looking for those core beliefs, core ideas, you'll start to see what the real issue is underneath. And when we can create do wants and don't wants around that, that's when we tend to get a really beneficial effect. Okay, so the next step with this, once I've spotted that conflict there, so I'm just spelling it out for you even more clearly. So the real want of this person to resolve that conflict, what the person really wants or needs is to feel safe being attractive. Okay? As long as being attractive feels unsafe, they're never going to fully allow themselves to lose weight. As long as they associate weight and size and attractiveness together as well. There's another level of belief system there, but I'm thinking assumption for now. Okay? What they really want is to feel safe being attractive. That means it's safe being slim, and that means it's okay to lose weight. All right. But we can only find that out by drilling into the don't wants and the do wants a bit so we can understand the meaning of each of those phrases. And all this can be done quite conversationally. When in the notes we give you a little form for filling it in, and in the classroom sessions we go to this quite structured way. But you can do this with a pro forma sheet with the client as well. It's quite a good way to do it sometimes. I generally do it as a conversation. I might have a pad and scribble some words down. If there's lots of words, I might have a long list, so that can be handy. Okay, but we're trying to work out what's the conflict there. What needs to happen to allow them to get what they really want. All right. So, summarizing it in general terms, there's the issue there that they don't want anymore. All right. The real want will be the right conditions to resolve that conflict and allow them to feel better. And the result of that, it'll get them the thing they wanted in the first place. And if you can identify that and then turn this into some kind of positive phrase, that you can then use that as a suggestion or a visualization or a mantra or an affirmation, or they take it away like a self-hypnotic question, any whatever format you want to use it in. Right? And that's how we kind of complete that table that you probably see in the notes. Okay. So I made this up just now, but the original don't want would be to be overweight, for example. What they really do want is to feel safe being attractive. Okay. So putting these, and we may have got a few more phrases out of them with a bit more questioning. Okay. So now the affirmative kind of bit of this will be something like, look, I'm a grown up now. It's safe for me to be attractive. I can say no when I want and yes when it's right, and I'm in control now. Okay, so looking for feelings, words that give them that sense of safety, security, power, self-worth, self-esteem, all those things within inside themselves. And with those ideas there, now it's okay to lose weight and become slimmer, for example. Does that make sense? It's quite complicated to explain, but actually when you do it and you start using it, it's actually fairly simple. You just find out ask them about what they don't want, get them to talk about it, but drill deep, make a note of it. Ask them what they do want, same thing, drill down and find out what that means to them. Look for opposites there, but very occasionally there'll be a gap, okay? There will be a gap as well, all right? Sometimes they'll say, I don't want to be this, I don't want to be this, but it'll be too far ahead. They need to be something else instead. Okay. So the gap in the middle, this is my last point for now, and then we'll have a chat and ask questions and maybe go through examples if you want. The gap in the middle would nearly always involve one or more of the core beliefs, all right? Which is your sense of enoughness. Am I good enough, lovable enough, likable enough, worthy, all that kind of stuff. Or it'll be safety and security. Do I feel safe and secure? Or it'll be, am I in control, or do I feel helpless, powerless, that kind of things. Do I feel accepted and do I belong, do I fit in, or do I feel separate, disconnected, on my own, lost, all that kind of stuff. Right? Am I allowed to feel pleasure, or actually are my connections, my relationships about pain and suffering? Those ideas will just come up again and again. So what I tend to look for on the don't want, when they tell me what they don't want, I'll do lots of questioning until one of these ideas will come up. Eventually one of these will come up. Right? When I get to one of those, I think, okay, here we go. This is at the bottom of it. Same thing on the other side. What do you want about those? And again, we should hit those as well, one of the positive ones there. If we hit one of the negative ones on what they want, then there's a conflict to resolve. If we don't, and it's just positive, that's okay, but we just work at that deeper level. We don't want these ones over here, we don't want this over there, and that tends to be a much more effective way of doing it. You think about that example I gave you earlier, where the person said, you don't want to feel this, you wanted to feel grounded, loved and accepted. What was so simple about that is because straight away she jumped to these core beliefs as that's what she wanted. Right? We didn't have to do any stepping stones. She just, feeling loved, feeling accepted, grounded is like a safe feeling, So she came up with those straight away. So if someone comes up with those ideas straight away, it's usually fairly simple. If they don't use those kind of words or something that relates to those kind of words, you've normally got to do it in 2 stages. Cool. All right. Does that make sense? Hopefully explain it. I haven't got any more slides, but we can go through some more examples and chat about it if you want to. Okay, so let me know what you think about that. Does that clarify a little bit more about what we're looking to do with this little exercise? Any questions? And we can, we've got plenty of time, so if you want to do an example, you can type away and we'll see if we can do some live ones right here, right now. So put myself on the line there and see what happens. Any questions first of all, though? Just check my chat box. Okay. I think there's a few people typing and just waiting for your messages to come in. So anything you want. Let's see if we can explain it further for you, or give us an example. That'll make sense to me now. Good, really helpful. That's good. Excellent. I think sometimes with this one you just have to see it done a few times. Okay, very succinct. Okay, that's good. I'm getting better, Nikki. Thank you. I've explained this in different ways, and I'm finally realizing the little words I need to say to make it more understandable. So, I think if you just play around with this with people yourself, okay, then you'll start to see it and look out for those words: enoughness, safety, control, acceptance, belonging, pleasure. Look out for those. When you start seeing them come up again and again, it's like, oh my goodness, how could I not have seen that before? That's what it was like for me when I first saw it. And very often, say on the don't want side, when you start digging into it, you'll get a list of words, say negative words. And what I always try and do, words or phrases, is on the other side, ask them to come up with an opposite positive version on the other side. All right? So that all the negatives are covered by a positive. So sometimes it's very, very simple, just a few words or a simple phrase. Sometimes it's a whole list of phrases. And those lists become a handcrafted script in a way. Very personal suggestion script if you're doing a straightforward hypno session. Right? Now, of course, sometimes when you're doing this is going to trigger stuff. So then there's an opportunity. Well, we could think, well, why does a person feel unsafe, feeling attractive? We're making an assumption there. But so at this point, you could also go and do some analytical stuff, regression type stuff if you want to. But it all depends on the nature of the session, how much time you've got. This could be first session with someone, but there's obviously maybe an issue highlighted there. So the second session, you say, how you been getting on? They say, pretty good, but still feeling this. And then you can either do the same thing again, or you can just do a bit of analytical work to dig into that and maybe, feel around, see where it takes you to. Good. Any more questions? I think I've kind of explained it as simply as I can right now, but if there's any more questions on that, please, well, if you've got your own example, any questions you want to ask, then please do. Thanks, Nikki, that's good. But if everyone's okay, then, okay, good, you not wanting to be angry. Okay, is this a client? Celia, can I ask, is it a client or is it you, if you don't mind me asking? Or we can pretend it's someone else if you want to. Okay, let's say, okay, just checking it's right. Right. So I'd need to know, okay, so what I'd say, you don't want to be angry with a family member. Okay, so what do they want to be? First of all, is what I'd say. How would you rather be? And they'd probably say the opposite of angry is going to be, well, it depends actually, okay? The opposite of angry should be something like calm or something like that, really, okay? But they might come up with a different word, okay? And that word will be a real giveaway as to what they really want. Because they might say, I don't want to be angry, I want to be forgiving. Okay, so it's like, okay, so what conditions do we need to be met so that you can be more, so you can forgive? Well, it might be, I want to be more patient, okay? What conditions do we need so you can feel more patient? All right. But on the other side, I might say, well, in what way angry? What kind of angry? What happens? Which family member? Do you know the family member, by the way? If you do, just let me know if that's okay, so we can go a little bit clearer with it. Sister. Okay, yeah. So I'd say, well, what kind of angry with your sister? What's that like? When your sister makes you angry, what's that like? Because remember, anger is a response, and I'd say that to a client. I say, look, anger, it's a valid emotion now, but it's a response to something else. So what's the feeling underneath that? What's the hurt or the upset underneath the anger? What's that like? Okay, because that's what they don't want to feel. The anger is a response. So what's the feeling they don't want to feel underneath that towards the sister? And I'd be interested to see what they say there. Okay. And depending on what that answer was, I might want to dig a little bit more. Okay. If it was, I don't know, jealousy, control, favoritism, what's that like, you know? Being the lesser one or the whatever one. Okay. You know, making this up a bit because I don't know the details, but does that make sense to you? That's just like, what kind of angry? What's kind of the hurt, the upset underneath that? What's that like? Adam, yeah, so how about more unspecific issues like lack of confidence? I guess you start, so I'd say you could do that, yeah. What I'd probably say is, well, what kind of lack of confidence? What kind of, that's a good one, what kind of lack of confidence? And then we get a little bit more specific on the details. Okay. If you got more detail on that, Adam, then give us a bit more if you got it there. Thanks, Celia, that's great. Lack of confidence is going to be, there's going to be some anxiety in there somewhere, some uncertainty in some way, some doubt. All right. What kind of lack of confidence? What sort of confidence do you want? You know, what do you need to feel confident? You don't want to feel lack of confidence. What do you want to feel? Confident. Okay, what does that mean? Confident in what way? What's it like to feel confident? It might be, I don't know, I'm guessing this before you type anything, but if it's a presentation, it might be, well, knowing what I'm talking about, knowing my subject, trusting that I can deliver the presentation and stay focused and keep people entertained, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So really, what you want is to stay calm, stay focused, deliver the presentation. What do you need? What do you want? What do you need to feel to do that? I need to prepare properly. I need to know that people are believing me. I need to focus on what I'm saying. That kind of stuff. All right. So you can dig a few levels down, and those specifics there, I'm making this up completely, but those specifics there would then be what you could use as suggestions, visualization, mantras, affirmations, that kind of stuff. You take time to prepare. Remember that you know your subject. The people are there to listen, to learn, and so on. Okay. And then, depending on what the lack of confidence was, the anxiety, the fear, the worry, we look for the don't wants over there and make sure we get a good list of those, and then make sure there was a positive one for every single one of those. Does that make sense, Adam? Okay, so it all depends on the details, really. So, but even if it's, okay, just for instance, okay, great. Yeah, I mean, however vague someone is, they're vague because they're avoiding saying the actual core issue. Once you can get someone to say the core issue, then we know what we're dealing with. Then we know we've got the crux of the situation. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Because vague things, you think, well, what do I do with that? It's so vague. But actually, if you just probe a little deeper with a few questions, it'll get specific pretty quickly. Cool. Anybody else? Any other questions? What is it you don't want? What's that like? What is it you do want? What's that like? Oh, and if the want isn't the opposite of what they don't want, there's probably needs to be a stepping stone there. All right. A good test would be if you had a dictionary and they say one word as the don't want. If the word they're giving you doesn't come up as an opposite in the dictionary, there's probably something missing somewhere. Okay. Don't know, says Nikki. Don't know. What if they say I don't know? Is that what you mean? Just give me a little example if that's okay. What if they don't know what they want? Or what they don't want? Yeah, okay. Well, a lot of people don't know what they want, so that's why we say, well, what is it you don't want? That's much easier then. I don't want this, I don't want to think this, I don't want to feel this. All right, so you get a list of words, and you say, well, what's the opposite of that word? Don't try and think about what they want, just think, what's the opposite of that word? What's the opposite of feeling lost? The footballer said grounded. Okay, great. All right. What's the opposite of feeling lonely or feeling loved? You know? Does that make sense? Okay, you meant confused. What they want? Well, if they're confused, confused in what way? What kind of confused? Sorry to ask, just trying to clarify. If they're confused about, actually I'm just second guessing it, let me wait for you to type the answer. If somebody's not sure, then I just keep asking what they don't want, get a list of those words, then ask them to come up with an opposite. And if that opposite doesn't make sense to me, I'll ask them, well, that's, you know, sometimes I'll say that, well, that's not the opposite of that. You know, what's the opposite of that, really? You know, see what they say. I'm actually doing this. It's okay. It's fine. Just trying to work out what you meant. Whatever answer somebody says, if you keep asking those kind of questions, they will get more specific. Okay. Oh, I've got one. Don't want to be a perfectionist. Okay, perfectionist. All right, great. So what's it like being a perfectionist, or what kind of perfectionist? That's what I want to know first of all. What's that like, being a perfectionist? Or what does that mean, being a perfectionist? And see what kind of words came up. Okay. What does that involve, being a perfectionist? What does it mean? And what does it help you achieve, being a perfectionist? What does it help you gain or get? What does it protect you from? What does it stop you from feeling? What does it help you try and avoid, being a perfectionist? Okay. And we'd probably get, you know, half a dozen phrases from that, digging into that. And on the surface level, we might say, well, what do you want instead? Instead of being perfectionist, what do you want instead? And the second guessing here, the usual answer is, well, I want to be able to just have a go and do my best, and if I make a mistake, it's okay. I just want to be able to do good enough rather than perfect. Something that's the usual kind of thing. Okay. But if we say, well, what's that like? Just doing your best and making a mistake. A perfectionist will say, well, actually, that's terrible, because if I make a mistake, I feel terrible. You know, I feel dreadful. Right? So then we have a conflict, a bit like the weight loss one earlier. Okay. It's okay not to be a perfectionist, but if I'm not a perfectionist, that's also quite scary, because that means I'm not good enough, or a failure, or open to criticism or disappointment, all that kind of stuff. So there's a conflict. So then we'd have to find out, well, you know, what do you need to feel? What do you need to believe in order for it to be okay to not be a perfectionist? Okay, something like that. Does that make sense, Anna? And we probably get a little list on each side, and they need to tie up in some way. So whatever the list on the left is, and don't want about being perfectionist, we need to have some kind of positive one on the right side. Not just saying, you are now this lovely, amazing person who does this, fluffy, 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 not that, but like, what will create the right conditions to allow them to not be a perfectionist anymore? Okay, so just think of it in those kind of terms. Good. Anybody else pull an idea out the bag for now we can go through? Otherwise we can leave it there if you want. I think that little slide there summarises the whole thing, really. Can you give some examples? Do you know what? Whenever I try and pull examples of this, I always struggle to think of any. I must do this hundreds of times, but my mind goes blank when I try and think about these, because they tend to happen on the spot. Oh, can you give me in the middle of perfectionist? Sorry. Okay. So a person will be a perfectionist because they try not to make a mistake, because they try not to create the outcome that making a mistake means, which is usually criticism, disappointment, letdown, failure, inadequacy, something like that. Okay. Those are the typical things why people are perfectionists. They're trying to control something in some way. If I can get this absolutely perfect, I'm in control, and everything goes exactly according to plan. No one can say anything or do anything, right? So we probably need to find out what the specifics of that might be. But instead of being afraid of making a mistake, we need to feel that it's safe to make a mistake, for example. Actually, I remember a different footballer I was working with recently as well had this. This footballer was trying to do a 10 out of 10 performance all the time. Okay, and every time there's even the tiniest mistake, she's thinking, "That's it. I've let everyone down. I'm the disappointment." Okay, felt like a failure, and is really affecting the game, losing confidence and that kind of stuff. So that's a form of perfectionism in a way. And so I said to her, so instead of being 10 out of 10, what would it be like if your target was 8 out of 10? If your target average performance was an 8 out of 10 on a match, what would that be like? And she just said, well, straight away the pressure's off, isn't it? So if I make a mistake, it's all right. It doesn't matter. I can make 1 or 2 mistakes and that's okay. Right? And so, well, how different does that feel when you're playing? Well, it's great because it means if I make a mistake, I can just pick myself up, get back on it, chase, pursue, see if I can make it up, and then we just get on with the rest of the game. Right? Whereas before, 1 mistake that's it, game over, end of it really. Does that make sense, Kaz? So for that person, this is a real example from just about 10 days ago. Instead of being a 10 out of 10 each time, instead of being perfectionist, aim for 8 out of 10. And then it's okay. All right. And then sometimes you might have to do a little chat around, well, what caused them to be a perfectionist in the first place, a little ease around that, and then back to it. But good. Yeah, it's a good example. Thanks. Great. I forgot about that one. It's always trying to ease the fear. There's always going to be a fear somewhere. So if you can ease the fear, find out what the fear is, focus on easing that, then it will go back up through the levels, back up through the layers again, like the weight loss one earlier. Safe to be attractive, in that person's mind, therefore safe to be slim, therefore safe to lose weight. Okay. Good. Well done, everyone. That's great. Any other questions? It's okay if there isn't any more examples. I do have some videos of this, actually. I did a video of this in a classroom earlier last year. I haven't quite uploaded it yet, where we went around the classroom just asking people to do this. I think we got about 5 or 6 people did this, and I just haven't quite edited the video yet, but I will add it so you can get some examples there. Good, thanks everyone, that's great. Again, keep it simple, right? Please don't try and think of it as too complicated. It's just working out, what's this person really thinking? What are they really worried about? What are they really afraid of? What's the opposite of that? What do they need to feel instead of that in order to feel different, better, safer, more in control, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. Focus on those ideas, then that will then get them the outcome they want, much more likely. Lovely. Thanks, Adam. Happy New Year to you too, everybody. Thanks, Colin, everyone. I will upload this and the slides hopefully the next day or so, and then we'll catch up with you soon. Cheers everybody, take care.